Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. Addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center with support from Penn Foster and Catapult Learning and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this February edition of Solutions. We were just noticing that it's been 8 years since the first Solutions broadcast, which was a radio webcast in February of 2008. My math is terrible. But anyway, we did know it's 8 years. And you know, we've had sponsors from the beginning. Penn Foster has been with us from the get-go. And also Clemson Broadcast Productions. Now we have Catapult Learning, and we're delighted for their sponsorship as well. So this is a big day, and it's going to be a big day because we're talking about something that is fun, and yet it's so important. It's got so much depth to it that I think you're really going to be impressed with our topic today. The topic is recess, and is there some learning that can take place at recess and what other impacts it has? It's a great topic that we're so excited about sharing with our audience today. Karen Withington, my co-host, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Nice to have you back.
Happy anniversary. You've been with the Solutions program from the beginning.
From the beginning. It was very different in radio, I must say. We could do all kinds of things that we can't do now, passing notes and all kinds of things. So here, what you see is what you get. No hiding with the cameras on us. But we kind of feel more connected to our audience that way.
Right.
So I think it's been kind of nice.
It's nice.
So as I said, it's been 8 years that we've been providing this professional development opportunity. And professional development for us is a long-term thing. It's not one-shot deals. It's let's learn about something in depth. Let's work in teams. Let's come up with some ways that we can make real change. And we're thinking today we're going to introduce a topic that many may not have thought about before as they consider professional development. But from what we're seeing in the research, it's pretty darn important. And so there's the recess that we're going to be doing. So
a lot of our topics are on what happens in the classroom.
Yes.
And yet the strategies for dropout prevention include outside of the classroom focus also.
Especially during the school day.
Right.
During the school day. So this is going to be an eye-opener, I guarantee you all, an eye-opener for today. Now, before we introduce Dave, we're going to talk about things that are going on at the National Dropout Prevention Center. As I said, in this segment, we always talk about the neat things you're all doing. So, Karen, you're here to fill us in.
Okay. Well, we are doing a lot of things, and we have big events and small events, but I want to invite all of our participants, all of our viewers to join us for some of our big events coming up. In February 14th through 17th,
which is coming up very
just
soon.
Next week, we will be in Myrtle Beach for our the 2016 At-Risk Youth National Forum, and the topic is Reaching Beyond the Risk. And we have we have lots of breakout sessions, and it'll be a great professional learning opportunity. And registration is still open for that.
Oh, it is still open.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, hotel.
That's good to know.
Everything's available, so please come and join us in Myrtle Beach, February 14th through 17th. Then in March 6th through 9th, we will be in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, for the National Forum on Dropout Prevention, serving Native students and tribal communities. A very great conference as well. We've been doing several years now, looking at those Native American communities and some of the issues out there. And the first time we'll be in Oklahoma with that conference, so that's exciting.
That's always a fascinating one.
March 6th through 9th. Definitely registration open for that as well, so please sign up now. Then in June, we'll be down close to Orlando. We'll be in Kissimmee, Florida, June 26th through 29th, 2016, for the Reaching the Wounded Student Conference, which focuses on looking at student situations from sort of a trauma-informed focus view, and also even looking at compassion fatigue for teachers, counselors, and school workers and social agency workers as well. So a little bit smaller conference there. We have some limited call for proposals to present there if any of our viewers are interested in presenting at that conference. It's a limited opening for that right now, but definitely come to that conference. It should be a good one.
And put on your calendars next fall.
October, very exciting. 2nd through the 5th of October, we are going to Detroit, Michigan, and that is our annual network conference.
Yeah, that's the biggie.
That's going
and
to be
so
exciting.
do put that on your calendar because there'll be everything there for everybody. That's such a great event. Well, now to today's program, we do want to tell our listeners about several things. First of all, we have ways for you to interact with the guest in not necessarily real time, but through the internet. You can do it with our discussion board, which is on the webpage.
Right.
And also through the tweeting style. Okay. So we, Karen, you tell them about tweeting. You know the addresses.
All right. Discussion board, put your comments, but if you'd like to join in a thread that could be open to anybody, I mean, we could use the hashtag recess.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And you can tweet to the National Dropout Prevention Center at NDPCN. Mm-hmm. And our guest today also has a Twitter account at Dave_Flem.
Yes.
F-L-E-M.
Yes. That's a very modern way to communicate, and we're trying to
tweet.
be modern.
And say something to us on Facebook as well.
That's true. That's true. We have that as well. So we try to reach out as many ways as we can. Now, there's a lot of resources here, and we mentioned this as being good professional development. We need to have those kinds of resources. And so we have a good listing there for you to get started so you can plan some professional development after today's program. And one thing we want to tell you about is a heads up. Dave and I and several colleagues across this campus have been working for months on a video project with Clemson Broadcast Productions on recess and policies related to recess that we will be advocating. So that's being worked on right now. Scripts are being written, filming's taking place, kind of fun things. And when that's available, we will put it on this website for people, and perhaps you can also highlight it on the home page. But I think you'll find that after hearing this program and thinking about what you want to do, you'll realize that policy is a pretty important part of it. And this particular video will help support those efforts that you might want to make in your communities. And so now that I think we've done all the preliminaries, without further ado, we need to introduce Dave, who's been sitting here nodding his head talking with us. And I feel like I've seen him, but maybe the audience hasn't yet. So they need to see Dave and get to know who he is.
Right. So I'm delighted to introduce our guest today. And our topic again is on recess and how it's an underutilized opportunity in schools. So Dave, so glad to have you here. Dr. Dave Fleming is Associate Professor and Graduate Coordinator in the Eugene T. Moore School of Education at Clemson University. And he is a Research Fellow at the National Dropout Prevention Center.
Yes.
And he teaches research methods at Clemson University and presents and is well known as bringing in a lot of grant money, I must say. He secured over $4 million to support his work here in the School of Education. And you're currently you're a principal investigator for Goalpost, Goal-Oriented Performance in Out-of-School Time, a partnership with Clemson University and 3 local school districts in after-school care, after-school programs.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the Gold Coast Project recently received the College Award of Excellence at Clemson University. So I'm just very pleased to introduce our guest today, Dr. Dave Fleming.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a great resource for teachers, the webcast. Thank you for putting those on, and thank you, Clemson Broadcasting, for making them look professional and accessible to all the teachers that I know benefit greatly from the opportunities that come from it. I hope that we can add to that list and add to the body of knowledge that practitioners can use as well as researchers today with the idea that maybe recess is something we should take a look at. My background, or the line of research that I focus on, is in out-of-school time education. So the reason for that is because I often hear people saying, well, what we need to do in education is get the teachers to teach harder, or teach better. And I have been in teacher education for 2 decades, and I've been in a lot of classrooms with a lot of teachers, and they're not looking at the teachers that I'm looking at. I see some great professionals that do amazing things with kids, very creative, producing environments with which kids can benefit from. And so I look at those areas that are outside the classroom by which we can make an impact. And so I specifically look at before school programs, after school programs, summer programs, and then we could slide recess into this as well, because it is an opportunity that we provide for kids on a daily basis in many places, but I'm not sure we're utilizing it to its best capacity. And so that's what I wanted to talk with you about today.
Great.
Well, let's get started, because this is a great topic, and as I say, it's got many layers that I think is going to surprise our audience, how much there is to this.
Well, good. Well, what I'll do is I'll give you an overview. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what recess is and what it isn't. We'll look at the current status across the country and other countries as well. What are they doing with these types of break periods? We'll look at different professional organizations and what their position statements are related to recess. And then we'll look at the impact it has on academics. We'll look at the impact on physical activity and health. We'll look at the impact on social skill development, and then also how it would be delivered. Should it be a structured environment? Should it be unstructured? Is there some type of hybrid that would be best? And then I'll finalize it with kind of a challenge to the next level. You know, can we use recess for purposeful leisure time development? And see if we can put that challenge out there and see if we can make some good benefits from it.
And you know, that is a challenge nowadays when we think about leisure time spent by young people and something in their hand where they're doing this too. And it's not television that's the big bugaboo anymore. It's computers, and not so much computers anymore, but the iPads, the notebooks, the Kindle Fires, and the iPhones, and so forth in that world. That's where their leisure time is going. So that's the world we live in, and I'm real curious to see that if changes during the school day might impact that. So I know you're going there, but I thought I'd mention that world just to remind anybody who hasn't noticed that that's what's out there right now.
The connection with nature and connection with other people.
Yeah, is missing in a lot of ways. Okay.
Right. So it's a very contemporary issue that we're dealing with, and it's becoming a larger issue day by day as screen time increases, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll finalize it with ways in which people can support recess. You know, teachers, administrators, parents, kids.
Good.
What we can
Something
do.
concrete. Very good.
Yeah. So, if we don't mind, let's talk about what it is. Recess itself, I've given the CDC definition on the slide, which is regularly scheduled periods within the elementary school day for unstructured physical activity and play. And I wanted to focus on that regularly scheduled period, because that means that we're identifying a core component of the school day, and preferably perhaps more than one component of that day in which we are taking some breaks and we're doing something different than the academic content. Utilizing that opportunity for catching our breath, getting some physical activity, doing something a little bit different, and then returning to the academic content later. So that's recognized by the CDC as an important part of the educational process. What you see usually, if you walk out to most elementary schools, you'll see chase games such as tag or just chasing around the field. You'll see ball games like Foursquare or basketball or wall ball or soccer or something like that. You'll see jumping or verbal games where you'll see jump rope, hopscotch, and some different type of rhyming activities that might be going on. And you'll see general play where it might be just solitary play, it might be a make-believe or role-playing, or it might be equipment-oriented where it's the playground itself that's kind of guiding the activity that's going on. But what's key is that you'll usually see activity which is the voice and choice of the child. The child, him or herself, will choose the activity to participate in, how long to participate in it, decide when to choose and shift to something else, and they're empowered to make that choice during this time period. And that's real important for youth development and for the child, him or herself, to be able to develop the ideas associated with playing and cooperating and interacting with others.
You know, it doesn't surprise me when you say that they get to choose what they get to do, that when you ask, especially little kids, what's your favorite part of school? You all know what they say.
Recess.
And that's the one place they can choose, that they definitely can choose. Now, hopefully during the classroom there's some other opportunities, but every day they can choose that.
Well, I was thinking back to recess. You got to change too from day to day. You could try something one day. Then you had to kind of, if you didn't like it so much, you had to deal with how are you going to tell your friends. Maybe you wanted to do something different. There's just so many things you learn on the recess.
Just
in the
think about the
playground.
learning just in that situation, Karen. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe our natural reaction would be to say that, oh, well, so that your favorite part of the day is when you didn't do anything. But that's not true.
Oh, no.
It's because the child gets the opportunity to be empowered to make that choice and to be active in things that they wish to participate in. That's the value to them, and that's why when they get home at the end of the day, they're remembering that. They really don't remember when they weren't given anything to do or weren't allowed the opportunity to choose something to do.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity for kids and something we should maximize during the school day as much as possible. Yet what we see is that recess time ranges from 20 to 60 minutes per day when allocated. Of course, we've got some schools that are ratcheting back on it, some schools that are limiting the opportunity to participate, and some teachers that are using it as a way to keep students back to do makeup work or other things that are keeping the students from the opportunity to participate.
Yeah. Which is of concern. I think you're going to go into some of that, aren't you?
I am.
Yes. Okay.
I am.
Do they break it up into little chunks, or is it more that, I mean...
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, if you see, and we'll get into what some other countries do in that regard, but the mass versus distributed practice certainly comes into play here, where sometimes it's just the break itself. It doesn't even necessarily matter what you're doing during that break. It's the fact that you've taken some time off and come back to learn your content later.
Well, it's got to be good for your brain to have that little space.
We need it as well. It's
Yeah.
not just for elementary
Exactly.
kids, high school kids, or college students. We're refreshed in the same way when we take a break, and we know when we need it as well.
When you look, I mean, we go to conferences a lot, and you know the professional, the presenters who know how to do it. After about 20 minutes, it's not that they stop talking, but they give you something to interact with your neighbors to do. And I mean, they won't go, when you talk to them, don't go beyond 20 minutes.
Right.
So if we can't do that, how can we expect these children to, without some kind of a break or clever, creative way to engage them?
Yeah. And it's not a reflection on the teacher. It's just a reflection on the cognitive capacity of the child, him or herself.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're humans,
Absolutely.
and they're little humans.
So let's talk about what recess is not.
Right.
And or what it shouldn't be. Sometimes people will think of recess as physical activity outside, and if they're getting physical activity and physical education, that means that, well, we don't need one or the other, and that's just not true either. Recess should not be it should be a complement to physical education. In other words, we'll learn motor skills, we'll learn fitness skills and different types of activity in physical education, and recess is a place where we can perhaps apply some of those, but it shouldn't be a replacement one or the other at all. It's also not a waste of unproductive time during the school day. There will be some that will think that if we've got some extra time and we've got some standardized tests bearing down on us, that a better use of that 20 minutes might be to get a little bit more academic content in. But the research suggests that if we just keep going and just try to cram that information into a child or a middle schooler or a high schooler or even a college student, we just continue to lose the cognitive opportunities throughout the time that we're trying to do that. We need to take that break, give them a chance to come back and get refocused.
So you're really saying that's counterproductive, to kind of just eliminate recess and have 20 more minutes of academic time. Counterproductive. And I think that your next bullet was, oh gosh, don't have the glasses on, but it was the one about taking away recess.
Right.
Same thing. Also, wouldn't you say that's counterproductive
It
too?
certainly is. That's when you have, for instance, a child with a behavior problem during class, and we hold recess that they love to do away from them. What tends to happen is that the behavior incidents that led to that infraction are probably going to be exacerbated after the recess and the students come back in, because the research suggests that if you give them an opportunity to be physically active, to interact with other peers, when they come back, they're more on task. So if we have a student who's having some behavior issues, certainly the last thing we will want to do in that case is to hold them out from the one thing that may get them back on track afterwards.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that may be related to the self-directedness, or they can make their own decisions a little bit more during the recess, and they're not constrained by certain rules. So
and I was just also thinking about the energy levels of children
that too.
And sitting still for so long. And I just wondered if you see this more with boys than girls. I mean, there's just that. I have all these grandsons. They're very energetic.
Well, certainly the types of play that go on during recess does have some gender specificity associated with
Yes,
it.
yes, yes.
But regardless, the benefits are the same.
For both,
They're
yes.
they're very similar when they come back into the
Well, that's
classroom.
good. That's good. Because I wouldn't want my recess taken away from me, Karen, because I was a girl.
Me either.
Well, let's look at what's currently going on with
Yeah.
recess, and we've kind of been cutting back since the 1980s slowly, and certainly since the No Child Left Behind Act was enacted. That's when we saw some great pullbacks on that recess time. We see that 5.3% of school districts report increases, whereas 32% report decreases in recess time at a time when we should be providing this opportunity for them. And the average of cuts have been around 50 minutes a week. So that's if we see this as a valuable component of the educational curriculum and of the child's school day, we're missing out on those opportunities through those cuts. We've also seen that some of the cuts are more pronounced with certain types of schools and certain types of students attending those schools. We see more higher levels of cuts in lower SES schools, in an urban environment, and with higher minority populations. So in schools where some of those needs are the greatest are the ones where some of the cuts have been the greatest as well.
So I'm guessing that they made those decisions to try to improve their test scores under No Child Left Behind. And it's like the road to nowhere is paved with good intentions. I mean, the intentions were good. We're going to get these kids doing well, but yet the strategy they chose was, as I said, counterproductive.
Right. Well, it makes sense if you don't know the research.
Yeah.
But once you start really understanding
that's fair.
the value that recess has in a student's daily interaction and performance, then it's one of the last things you're going to take out of their school day.
And again, I don't think this research is that well known in the educational community. Last year here at Clemson, they had an institute for the Play Institute, and they did have some sessions on recess there, but that audience tends not necessarily to be teachers. And so within the Parks and Rec, Tourism Management, which is a department here that sponsored this, that's a well-known idea. But in the educational community for teachers, it's not well known. I think don't you think that's true?
Well, I do, and it depends on your orientation towards what the purpose is. And one of the things that I will try to purport today is that, sure, recess can be a break. It's a break for the teachers, too.
Yes.
But it's much more than just that.
Yeah.
And it's not just the value of the break itself. It's the activities that the students can participate in recess, either by their own volition or by some type of semi-structured environment for them to guide them towards certain types of development. There's so many things we can do with it.
Yes.
So it just depends on your orientation. If you think it's just a break and they don't get anything out of it, then it would make sense to cut it out and replace it with something else. I just don't think that way.
Well, they're going to get some new ideas here today, Karen.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I was wondering, do schools have policies about? I think maybe you're getting ready to talk about that.
Yep. And most of the policies are local. You'll see even drilled down to the principal level on what their school schedule is going to be like. There are some policies out there that guide some of the practice, and I'll share some of those with you. Essentially, at the school district level, 60% of districts across the country have no recess policy whatsoever. So it's completely relying on the individual school and the principal and the staff
Schedule.
there and the scheduling to determine how they're going to use that time.
You know what I loved, and it's in one of the resources, the article by Olga Jarrett from Georgia State, is what Chicago public schools did to meet the challenge of having the instructional time that they felt they needed, but ensuring that 20 minutes a day for these elementary kids was for recess. They added 20 minutes to the school day. They didn't go either or. They just, now I understand that buses and all that have come into play, but there's a will, there's a way. And if it's seen to be so valuable, big school district like that did that. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Right, right. So you're right. I mean, they didn't have to take anything out to put that in, but the value was obviously there for the school district and the leaders, and I appreciate their initiative and forthrightness in doing that. When we look at districts that do have policies, 22% of them require daily recess, but less than half of those that are identified equate any time to that. So essentially, that we need you, we want you to have recess, and then you decide how long it's going to be and make it fit your schedule. And then finally, less than 7% of districts nationwide have a physical activity component that they require. They just assume that the schools and the individual sites will give the students what they need to be able to be physically active during the course of the day. And yet, if you look at the amount of physical activity that kids are getting these days and the obesity epidemic, we're not scratching the surface on giving them enough opportunities to be physically active.
Well, I kind of hope that on our discussion board, people might weigh in with what they're doing in their school, and if they're impressed with the rest of this conversation, which I know they will be, what they think they might propose to do at their local sites to increase how much their children, or to ensure they get enough time each day. It'll be fun to have that conversation. We haven't done a lot to encourage these conversations, I think, in the past, and just went out there, but I think that's one where what you're telling me, Dave, and is that there's not a lot of places which have policies are pretty much a free-for-all for what schools are doing, and so that to me is talk about opportunity. And opportunity, okay, let's look at this. It's a serious part of the school day. Let's even though it's the fun part, it's serious.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's see what happens.
If you're looking at the statistics, would that be 18% or about 18% have some type of time? They do suggest a time. It might be good to share for those districts.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. So on
Yeah.
the discussion board, for those that are watching, I'd like to know the type of policies that are being implemented across the country, and also how well they're working,
Right.
and how well they're adhered to as well.
Yeah. I'm going to mention something right now, which a lot of people already know, but we are also, Dave, on Clemson TV. And in order for people to participate from Clemson TV World to the National Dropout Prevention Center conversation is to go to the solutions site on the National Dropout Prevention Center to participate in the discussion board.
Right.
So I just wanted to direct their traffic to that because this could be a great conversation.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, there's state level policies as well. Unfortunately, they're not guiding us very much because only 5 states require daily recess as a policy.
Well, that's something.
It's a start, I suppose, and only 1 requires at least 20 minutes. So there's something.
Oh, who would that be?
Oh gosh, I think
I'm sorry.
I think it's Hawaii that might be and
because
I
it's
could
so
be wrong about that. So sorry if I mischaracterize that. But we've got a long way to go, and there's lots of work we can do at the state level, because essentially it's the policies at the district and state level that'll help keep us on the right track for making these things happen. There are plenty of wonderful principals out there who don't care what the policies are. They're going to have recess. And they're going to have plenty of it anyway. But we want to make sure that it's across the board.
Yeah, it might be just kind of like a minimum. You can do more if you feel like there should be more, especially when we talk about what they do internationally. It's very interesting. But to have a basic minimum and that be a starting point, as you say, in state policy.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And at least let's get more to recommend it, because currently we have 8 states that recommend daily recess. So it's not required. It's a little bit lighter language. And from those, only 2 of those recommend at least 20 minutes. So we're talking about time and frequency that we want to try to inculcate within the policy realm.
Oh, wow.
Then there's 10 states that require a set amount of physical activity per day. That's required, and then 4 states that recommend a specific amount of physical activity per day. And so again, we've got a lot of ground we can make up there if we want students to be physically active and healthy, which is a part of their normal growth and development.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's beyond, is that including physical education classes, which aren't every day usually?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And so we'll get to some of the policies later as far as recommendations are concerned, coming from some of the organizations. But generally speaking, we're looking for 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. And that can be difficult if they don't get any during the day. if we're relying on them to get that.
Oh,
when they,
you mean from when they wake up in the morning till when they go to bed?
That's
at night.
correct. Accumulated
Yeah,
during
so
the
that's
course
where
of the
that
day.
impact of what happens in the school day, which might affect their leisure time after school, plays into. Yes,
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's more tied than you might think. We'll
Yeah,
talk about
now
that
we
here in
get fun
just a
to
few
talk about
minutes.
that. Yeah.
But let's talk about what they do in other parts of the world for a
Yes.
few minutes. We see that most of the countries in Europe have recess incorporated. They usually do between 30 and 100 minutes of recess per day. And probably the star in that would be Finland. Finland is doing some amazing things with their academics, and students are learning at very high rates. Yet, a third of their school day is spent in unstructured outdoor play. They have as much recess time as you'll see in any country. So they value it. They see it as part of the curriculum. They see it as part of normal growth and human development for their kids. And they're going to make sure that the kids are participating in it.
Well, Finland doesn't surprise me, but Japan does, because we have the stereotype of Japanese students working all the time, very driven, very driven. And so yet you're saying 25% of the time is not structured.
It's non-academic, and so they don't have a recess like that we call it. But those will be things where they're not specifically on the academic content. So they won't necessarily be in your unstructured play that you'll see in American schools. But still, they see the value of learning academic content for a certain time period, and then stepping away from it, and that being the best way.
And I think that probably has to do a lot with the capacity of our brains.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and learning. Yeah, very wise. Okay.
Yep, we see something similar in China, and lots of different implementations across China. But you'll see some that permit 1 to 2 hours per day of social activities, and some class periods where they have 10 minutes of a break within each class period itself. Recognizing that you can only learn for a certain period of time before we have to take a break, and then we can come back to it.
So 20 minutes seems a very modest request.
Right.
We're behind the times if we compare ourselves to most
Yeah.
of these countries, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's keep going.
Well, let's take a look then at the national organizations that support recess and what they have to say. This is where I foreshadowed the 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day that's supported by CDC as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. And again, this is cumulative. So this is not meant to be that they're going to go out for an hour run at some point during the day, although they could. This means that they get a few minutes here, 15 minutes there, and 20 minutes there, but before they lay their head down at the end of the day, they should have accumulated 60 minutes during that time period. And in many schools, you'll see physical education offered once or twice a week. And that means that the only other physical activity they may be able to get during the course of that school day might be recess. And if they're already at a deficit before they go home, and their favorite leisure time activity is PlayStation or Xbox, then they're probably not going to get that 60 minutes before they get to the end of the day.
And if they ride on the school bus and they go home on the school bus, they're not walking or biking to school like some children do.
Right.
Yeah, and that's probably in most cases it's on a bus.
Yeah.
Or a car, or the
Right.
car, family car.
Shape America suggests that all elementary school students should be provided at least one daily period of recess, 20 minutes per day, which again is kind of that minimum standard that we're looking for. The National Association of Early Childhood Specialists and State Departments of Education suggest that it's an essential component of the curriculum, and it should be from preschool through elementary school. And I subscribe to that. I think this is a part of the curriculum. It's not a break from what the students are learning. It is part of what they're learning. You'll see Shape America, as well as the National Association of Elementary School Principals and the National Association of State Boards of Education, suggesting that the students need both physical education and recess, that one does not supplant another, that they complement each other, that they have the needs, hopefully daily for both, but as much as possible that there are two different missions with those types of activities for kids. The American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as Shape America, also suggests that it should not be taken away as punishment. And I'll add, also for makeup work. sometimes it's convenient that when a child is missed school yesterday and they need to make up a test, that we'll just keep them in during recess so that they can make that up. If it's a formal part of the curriculum and a valuable component of the program, that is not something that you want to take away to do the makeup work either. And then finally, the National Association of Elementary School Principals suggests that we should promote the development and maintenance of appropriately supervised free play during the school day. And so it's accommodated for students, but it's also in a safe environment that's supervised appropriately. So there's lots of national organizations that are saying, hey, we need this, and we need this in different ways.
And they come from different perspectives as well. And it's always nice to see that last one with the principals who are in charge of the schools being of that mindset. That's great.
Well, I'm sure there's personal experience. You can remember how important recess was and what you learned in recess. But obviously there's research behind it, and there's some outcome variables and that it impacts things that the schools are going to be measured on and students can build on as well.
Right. So let's talk about some of those.
Okay.
All right. The first one would be academic impact, and that's the one that people tend to gravitate to, and for understandable reasons.
Yeah.
But the research is pretty clear on this, where when we look at studies that immediately after recess, students are more attentive and better able to perform cognitively. So they don't come back distracted; they come back refreshed and focused. Now, granted, sometimes it takes time to settle them back down, but in that process, they've got a clear mind. They're coming back and they're able to learn better than if we just held them in to teach them again harder and longer. We end up going backwards in those types of situations. We also see that when they come back from recess, that they're less fidgety and more on task. So there's our behavior issues, and the ones that benefit the most would be the ADHD students that are struggling with that. They especially need the opportunity to go out and be active. And choose the type of activities that they're participating in so that they can come back focused as well. Even little things like it was a study that looked at children raising their hands, that there was more hand raising back in the classroom after recess than before, which just suggests that they are ready to be engaged in the lessons again. And
maybe feel a little more confident.
And perhaps more confident as well. Absolutely.
That's an interesting one, don't you think?
Yeah. Around their peers, maybe they...
So we see that they perform better in literacy tasks as well, and their reading performance is increased after that recess period. So it certainly isn't something that we should be trying to hold back from them. And a lot of this is based on the idea of massed versus distributed practice. Look, I have a son who's in college right now, and I'm sure he's going to be cramming for exams at some point in time. But he also knows that the best way to study for it is all along. And it's the same thing when we're looking at kids within a school-based environment, that there's a point at which more is going to be less, and we need to stop, take a break, either a break that's in the classroom or a break that goes outside, moves, does something else, come back, and then let's get back to it again. And then you're distributing that knowledge over time as opposed to giving it in one too large of a chunk.
Well, that makes sense.
Versus distributive.
Yeah, and that's a key point, because we are all driven by these goals of improving academic performance. And if this is a method that will help with that, and also is part of the natural development of young people or any human being, we need to go with it and see how we can work it in.
Right. But I have one cautionary note related to that, which is if you take a break from a cognitive task that you're covering in a classroom and you replace it with another cognitive task for the students to do, even if it's more along the lines of fun, if it's something that the students haven't chosen themselves and they just see it as another cognitive task to perform, when they come back to the previous one, they haven't had the appropriate compensation to be able to come back and get focused again.
Interesting.
So again, some of that voice and choice for the students and the type of activities that they're participating in is as important as the topic and the activity itself.
Which is why recess is a good thing for this rather than some other thing that they didn't choose to do. Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Okay, so, well, besides the academic, we've got some physical activity and health benefits that come as a result. If you go to any elementary school and watch the kids at recess, you're going to see a lot of them very physically active out on the playground. And one of the things about this is it affords the opportunity for joy and movement. And again, in a physical education class, they're going to be taught motor skill acquisition. They're going to be taught how to play games and how to move in efficient manners and fitness types of concepts, and then have some opportunity to participate in that activity as well. But it's at recess where they'll have the opportunity to do it completely on their own with what they've learned. And that's where the joy of movement comes in. We want kids to be able to move because they want to move and they feel competent as movers.
Well, Karen and I both had experiences as little girls with jump roping. And when she started talking about how you got to do this, it's like, oh yeah, how we all learned how to jump in while two people were holding it. And we did that at recess.
I was so shy in third grade, and I saw my friends, they could run in, and I couldn't run into the jump rope. So my third grade teacher saw that I wanted to do it, but I wasn't brave enough to try.
Yeah.
So she worked with me and built up my confidence, and I learned how to run in. And that was third grade. I just remember a lot about third grade recess.
Must have been a great year for recess.
But I actually, then later I could take that confidence, and I had to move schools in the sixth grade.
Oh.
And jump rope was, again, big somehow in my sixth grade class. They did some kind of rubber bands, and you had to jump over them like that. And that's how I made friends. I could jump rope, and I made a lot of friends on the recess.
I mean, you could really analyze that story for all the learning that little Karen had.
Well, the key component there is that you became competent as a mover in a specific activity, and that was taught to you in physical education class, and then you were able to do that on your own. And that's what we find with physical activity. And it's not just kids, it's adults too.
Yes.
If we're not a good dancer, we tend not to go onto the dance floor. We tend to stay off to the side.
Yes.
There's only one exception to that, and that's golf. I'm terrible at golf, yet I still seem to go out and try and participate.
Well, you just keep trying, Dave. That day will come.
I will.
Well, I think I had to have the confidence to join in, too. It was not so much physical competence as much as bravery of joining in a group that they were already good. And I wanted to join in, but I didn't know exactly how
So many
to
life
negotiate
lessons.
that.
Right.
So many life lessons. Yeah.
Well, some other aspects of physical activity. Of course, we've covered the 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity recommendations, and this is what recess can help us get to. There's also some research that suggests this is the opportunity for physical activity, even more so than physical education and after-school programs. And I may have some physical education teachers that might be asking, well, why would they be more active in recess than my class? Well, again, part of physical education is teaching and demonstrating and learning in that process, whereas at most recess, you open the door and they're immediately active.
Yes.
And they're active until you bring them back. And so that's why some of the opportunities to be physical active will actually be a little bit higher in a recess environment than a physical
I would think
education
so.
environment.
PE,
see
you have
that.
to wait your turn sometimes if
Yeah.
you're all practicing a particular skill.
Yeah. Plus,
that's a
I
good-
probably could have made an A on the mechanics of jump rope, but in the classroom, answering the test about when you do.
Oh, yeah.
But actually doing it, you had to do that on the.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, now this is some interesting research because we thought for a long time that compensation occurred, which means that if a kid was sedentary during the whole day, that when they got home, they would compensate by being more physically active when they got home. That is until we did the research on it, and we found the opposite was actually true. Whereas when kids were physically active during the day with recess or physical education, when they got home, they continued to be more physically active. The converse was also true. If they were sedentary during the course of the day, when they got home, they tended to be a little bit more sedentary than on other days.
Yeah.
And so if we really want kids to be fighting this obesity epidemic and learning through moving, we really need to provide those opportunities during the school day because they will transcend into their afternoon and evening activities as well.
That's an interesting piece of information.
And then finally, recess before lunch breaks. They've taken a look at this and found that when you have a recess period that happens before lunch, you get recess and then you'll have lunch like an hour later. Kids tend to eat more and eat better at the lunch period. We're wasting less food as a result. And it also impacts their behavior in the lunchroom setting as well as in the classroom following lunch.
This one makes so much sense, and I don't know if all schools are structured in this particular way. Recess, then lunch, which, you talk about coming back from resource, you got to get everybody settled down. Well, if you've had lunch, you're eating a better meal, and you're sort of settling down into what's going to come next, which in some cases might be a story or might be this or that, and then we can transition. But the fact about this is dear to my heart. They're eating a good quality meal. Some of them, it's the one good meal they have, and to abandon that because they so much want to play. To reverse that is just, it's almost like a no-brainer.
To start with lunch and then have recess as soon as they finish.
And
they're
then they
probably
go
going to
zooming
do
out.
the really quick,
easy,
they do. Not much, and then out the door.
That's what they do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, keep
All
going.
right.
Here we go.
Well, let's go on to social skill development. We've covered the academic piece and the physical activity and health, but there's also social skills that get developed in recess as well. This is where they get to engage with their peers in environments where they're not where they're supervised by adults, but the interactions are such that they're negotiating those activities themselves, and that's an essential skill. It's they're learning cooperation, learning sharing, problem solving, perseverance, self-control, leadership, and coping and managing with stress as well, among others. And this is their laboratory experience. So you may have a teacher that's teaching cooperative learning and cooperative activities within the classroom under their wing, but then they get to apply it out in the recess setting, and we get to see if it's really internalized at that point in time. There's a lot of kids that will certainly do what the teacher says in the classroom, but then when they get outside, we want to see that it's taken hold.
And it's a little bit supervised, a little bit controlled.
Right.
But still, they really do all the negotiations.
That's correct.
Yeah, and the negotiation piece is kind of interesting because, if there's often disputes when you're playing games, and how do you say they solve those on their own?
Well, it's interesting because there's some principles that have wanted to get rid of recess because that's where some of the it's when some of the bumps and bruises happen. That's when some of the bullying takes place, or that's when some of the disagreements take place. But if you look at some of the ethnographic research, what they found is it wasn't actually the recess component; it was the transitions. It was when they were called back in and they were running to get back in line and somebody stepped in front of me when I wanted to be at that spot, or running to go to the water fountain, or managing equipment. It wasn't the actual recess time itself. It was the management of the transition. Because what you'll see with kids is they want to play and they want to be active. The last thing they want to do is spend all of recess arguing about whether a ball hit the line or not.
Yeah.
So if you and I are playing a game and you and I disagree on whether the ball hit the line, we can incorporate things such as rock, paper, scissors. Let's figure it out really quick. And okay, you're right, and then they can get back to the game, which is what they want.
Right.
And so there's ways that we can teach some of that along the way. Now, having said that, whenever you have an open, free exchange of ideas and verbalizations and physical activity, you're going to have some type of conflict at some point in time. Yeah. But instead of trying to avoid that by thinking, well, we may have some bullying behavior take place, this is actually a teachable opportunity where we can take the things we're trying to teach in a classroom where they're seated in desks and in a controlled environment, and then also incorporate that into their free play and hold them to account when those things happen as well.
Lots of teachable moments at recess.
Absolutely. So this is really the only time that most kids have where they truly control their use of time. In order for schools to work effectively, you have to stay on schedule. There's a bell schedule and there's a lunch schedule and things like that. But it's the recess time that they truly kind of own that 20 minutes or 25 or hopefully more in some schools.
There's some of us who are older now, just like that 20 minutes where we can have a cup of coffee and nobody's bothering us. Right. It's probably like that. And I do remember it being a wonderful time of day. Lots of fun out there on that playground.
Well, let's take a look at structured versus unstructured. And this is a relatively new concept here in that, the traditional manner of recess has been open the doors, give them equipment and a safe place to play, let them design everything on their own, and then when the recess period is over, blow a whistle or whatever to bring them back in and take them back into the classroom. And this lends itself very well to the self-directed activities that students are participating in. But there's a growing movement on the aspect of structured recess, where they are actually being provided some activities to participate in, that they're encouraged to play specific games or given certain tasks that they're able to do to learn other types of skills, learn leadership skills and cooperative learning, and taught these things by a trained teacher or professional in another manner. And what can happen in these is higher levels of participation and gameplay can happen. You can have a more complex type of games and problem-solving activities occur because they're guided, at least initially, by some trained professionals. I think it's a good idea. I think it's something that should be considered. I know that, for instance, I've done some activities with kids. I'll give you an example where I do a lava pit where there's about a 20-yard distance from one place to another. And I use some equipment, whatever is available, a jump rope, a hula hoop, a plastic bag if the wind's blowing, that's always fun, and a hot spot or a frisbee. And then I ask the students to make their way across this lava pit from one place to another. And they have to step on the equipment. They can't step off the rope or outside the hula hoop. And they have to bring the equipment with them.
Yeah.
Now, almost every time I do this activity with kids, what will happen is one of the kids, at least, will step off of the rope or hula hoop into the lava pit. Now, what's their immediate reaction? What do you think they do immediately with their eyes and head?
I don't know. See if anybody saw them.
Right, and who do they look at? They look at me to catch them.
Yeah.
But I don't say a word. I make eye contact and I let them go. And then they get to the end of the lava pit. Everybody's happy and successful, and that's when I inform them, none of you were successful because everybody had at least one person who stepped off. Now they realize, oh, so it's not you holding me accountable, it's me holding myself accountable.
Oh, yes.
And then they can come back across the lava pit and they hold each other accountable, and they bring their own teams back, and then we can make adaptations to it. I give them a sound siren, where a basketball, and if they use any sound at all, then they have to go back. We take out some of the equipment as they go, and there's lots of ways to adapt it. But the whole point is that that they give something structured at the beginning, and then give them a chance to then step back and let them be self-directed as they go.
You know, I know you do a lot of work with goalposts and after-school programming, so this sort of makes me feel like you probably did something with that group of students. And so they've done that in so many students now are in after-school, that they learn something in after-school that then when they have recess earlier in the day, if they enjoyed it and want to play it, they've learned how to do it. And I mention this because I think a lot of schools are saying, well, this is cool, but who's going to do this during recess? Because the teachers, we got to train someone, it may not happen. So, but that's an opportunity there to connect those two after school activities. They've learned they can teach not all the kids stay after school, so they can teach the activity, sounds like a fun one, to the kids who are at recess. So do you see that happening, or would you not know? I mean,
I do.
Yeah.
Basically, when the kids, when an activity resonates with them, they're going to do it again.
Yeah.
Now, they might do it again at recess the next day. They may try to get away with it in PE when they're supposed to be doing something else.
Okay.
Or they may just be gathering the kids at home in their neighborhood to play as well.
Yeah.
All of those are okay because that means they're intrinsically motivated to continue this type of activity. And that's what we're talking about. When we're able to teach leadership, cooperative development, self-directed behavior in an environment like this, then it is a great opportunity to maximize whenever possible. And so, again, when I do these activities with kids, I don't bring everybody in.
Yeah.
I don't say, everybody come over and you're here, you have to do that. This. This recess environment is voice and choice. If you don't want to participate, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But what you'll see is that usually when the activity is engaging, other kids start wanting to do it as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great way to connect after school, where there is more curriculum kind of leadership than there is during the traditional recess. Wow, I learned something new. We got to talk about that for the video. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk then about me pushing this issue, even one step further. Recess for purposeful leisure time development. Now, you won't see this much in the literature because I'm proposing this as something that is an opportunity that we haven't necessarily tapped into, at least not formally. I know it goes on. I know that there are activities that are going on like it. But if you think about the leisure time use of kids when they're going home and they're bored and they're looking for something to do. You know, when we were young, we didn't have sexy instruments like a smartphone that we could play games on for hours on end, or video game systems that would engage us for hours, and then the time just disappears on us.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried that kids have a hard time being bored anymore and finding something productive to do. In fact, when I looked at it, the Pew Research came out and showed that 93% of youth that have smartphones use it to avoid boredom. In other words, as soon as they're bored, they reach for their pocket
That's what I was thinking.
and pull
they
it
don't
out.
know what to do with downtime.
And that 47% actually use it to avoid interacting with others. So if I don't want to talk to you, all I need to do is stick my head in my phone, and then I can avoid that type of interaction.
Right.
So I feel like we need to teach kids now how to be productive with their leisure time. That there are other things that can be done. That, you know, a literacy coach. If the literacy coach finds that some of their students are going to the library and taking them home and reading on their own without an assignment, that would be the pinnacle of success.
Right.
And that they are using that for their leisure time development in a productive way. If the physical education teacher finds out that so many of their kids have signed up for some of the recreational activities that are in the local community, or maybe some kids have gotten together and decided to run a 5K together, you know, these are things that the kids would do on their own, and that's the pinnacle of success for leisure time development. We see that the things that we're teaching are being transferred into productive use of their own time, as opposed to being completely sedentary and also non-interactive in a personalized setting.
Or even destructive.
And I didn't even go there, but there are things that we can do to help kids in that regard, and I think that recess is an opportunity for that. I recall an elementary teacher who would go jogging during recess, and she invited the students to go with her. And so instead of sitting, waiting for recess to be over, sure, she used it as her own fitness time, but she had a whole string of students just jogging right behind her. And she gave the impression to the students that when the teacher was on a break too, it didn't mean that she would sit on her phone. She used it for productive activity.
Absolutely.
And used it to show that she could maintain her fitness when even she had her breaks as well.
Well, that'll be good to follow that. And we're running out of time, so we need to kind of go to your last points, I think.
Sure. And that is what you can do to support recess.
Yes, this is very important. So we're going to focus on this.
Because we can't do it without a team effort.
Right.
So first of all, researchers, we need to continue to conduct studies on recess, not only how recess helps other things, like how it gets you ready to learn, but also how recess as a standalone component of youth development is important for kids. And we need to do both of those. Teachers need to continue to follow what's going on with recess, and also what's being allotted in their local community, and also work with administrators to ensure that students have enough opportunity to participate. Also, teachers need to make sure they don't use it as punishment or for makeup work. Administrators need to strive to develop policies that we are looking at frequency and time, and making sure that the students have ample opportunity to participate. Parents need to communicate with local leaders about the importance of recess and encourage policy development from them. And students also. Students need to continue to play, make the most of that experience, and also remind their teachers and their parents that, hey, they need a break sometimes, just like we do.
You know, if there's any surface learning students out there listening to this, you are included on this list as people who can help us make this cause. I think we've included probably everybody who could be in our audience today with some suggestions about how they can take what they've learned during the last hour and move this forward, because I think you've made your case. I think you have made your case. Don't you think so?
And it's a very important dropout prevention case as
Yes,
well.
it is.
It's one of the 15 strategies is what happens outside of school, out
Yeah.
of school.
Yeah,
and this is very important.
It is. So we are so glad that you have done this work and continue to do this work and have come today to join with us to share it with our audience.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of another hour so quickly. especially with this one. Now, wasn't it fun, audience? Did we have fun talking about recess and having memories? Karen and I with jump rope and all kinds of other memories were bubbling up. It's a joyful part of the school day, and so much was learned if you start thinking about it. So thank you, Dave, for bringing all these new ideas to our attention and showing us the value in dropout prevention for recess. So it's time to bid you adieu until next month, when we'll have another edition of Solutions. This is Marty Duckenfield. Thanks for joining us.